And hello again, and as I mentioned in my last video, I was thinking about painting this old Simpson helmet which had been given a rather poor custom paint job about 5 years ago. And since then I've had a little bang in it, a few scratches, so I thought, you know, I'm not too happy with it, so why not try and do it yourself and respray it a different colour or something like that. And so I made a start, and so far it's taken me about 2 hours to get to this point, which is longer than I thought because the top coat lacquer on here is actually quite poor. It sort of flakes off here and there, and once you start you've got to keep on going to remove the whole patch of lacquer. But I've got to that point now. But so far, I mean, it's not been difficult. I mean, a 10-year-old could do this. There's been no real skill required whatsoever. So now I've got to that point, I'll probably do a little bit more work on the surface. There's maybe a little bit here and there that could do with a bit more work, but only maybe another few minutes or so. And once I've done that, I can lay down the first coat of primer. And here we've got the helmet after its first few coats of primer. And there's a couple of small problems I found, one of which is my fault because I think I just banged it just there. So it damaged the primer as I did it, so that needs to be repaired. And one more serious issue, which I don't think the camera can pick up, is that there's a sort of shadow left behind where the original graphics were, where the flames were. And although you can't feel it, you can just about see it when it's very wet, when the paint's just about been sprayed on. I don't think you can probably see it there. So what I'm going to do with that is spray it all with filler primer, and then cut it back, spray it again, cut it back, spray it again, cut it back, until eventually I've got that nice and smooth. It's not difficult to do, it just takes quite a long time because you've got to wait an hour or so between each coat. So that's the thing I'm going to do next. And now here we are the next morning, and the filler primer's done its job. I've cut it all back, and now we're just about ready to paint on the colour coat. And the question is, what colour coat should that be? And having thought about it, I think this helmet should be colour matched with one of my bikes. And since I've got a few bikes, let's go and see what options I've got. Ducati red. Ducati red-ish. Ducati red with extras. Ducati red again. Oh, hang on. That doesn't count because it's not even painted. So I guess that means this helmet's going to have to be red. So here we go. I'm working in a very small confined space, but needs must. The artificial light I think makes this look a bit more orange than it really is, but believe me, it's actually Ducati red. And now here's the helmet with 2 or 3 light coats of Ducati red, and I must say it's not looking too bad. I know it doesn't look like much at the moment because there's no gloss on it, but that'll come from the lacquer once that goes on. And now a few days have passed, and this Ducati red paint has now hardened off. And now it's time for me to add these decals before I lacquer the helmet. And I must say I have agonised over where this NCR Scuderi decal should go, because it could have gone down here at the back, a little bit higher, further back at the front, whatever. And in the end what I did was I cut it in half because it was just too big as it was. So now we'll just have to see if I've got this thing on straight, and it's about time I pulled off this backing paper. Now these decals are actually very old, they're about 20 years old, and I bought them when I thought I might be building a sort of late 70s endurance racing replica for the road, a Ducati of course. But since then, prices of bevel drive Ducatis have gone through the roof, and it would be financial suicide to try and build something like that. And so these decals have been sitting in an envelope for, what, 20 years now, so it's about time I use them. So let's see if we can get this damn thing off here without causing any real problems. I don't even know it's going to stick on correctly because it's so old, but we'll try. And here we go, here's a little cartoon wolf. It'd be nice if he was white or gold or something like that, but these are standard colours, so we'll go with the NCR look, I think. And here we go. And that's actually not looking too bad. I'm quite happy with that, considering how old this particular decal is. Yeah, that seems to work quite well. And now what I've got to do is put the same decal on the other side in exactly the same place. And that's going to take me quite a while of faffing around, so come back when I've done that. And there's the other side done, and hopefully they're about the same position, height and angle wise. And if not, well, it's a bit late now to worry about it. And as you can see, I've reused the other half of that NCR decal on the front of the helmet. But as often happens, this wasn't so simple because when I checked out the decal, the middle of the lower line wasn't in the middle of the upper line. So what I had to do was cut it in half and reposition the NCR with the Scuderi, and now I think it looks more balanced. And so here we are now back in my little spray area. It's very tiny, but it does the job. And as you can see, I'm going to start with the lacquer, and so far it's had about 3 or 4 light coats, and I think it's going to need an awful lot more yet. And that's because the decals I've used are actually quite thick, much thicker than the ones I've used on my multi-guzzi fuel tank anyway. And so I need to build up the thickness of that lacquer so it completely buries those thick decals. And so I just need to carry on, and every hour or so I'll come back and give it yet another coat. And now here we are, a few days have passed, the lacquer's hardened off, and I've spent hours and hours and hours cutting back this lacquer to get a decent polish on it, to get a decent finish on it using this rubbing compound, and I must say, it does take an awful long time. It may well have been quicker to cut it back with some very fine wet and dry sandpaper, but I was a bit concerned about going too far with the wet and dry, so I did the slow but sure way of just using this rubbing compound, but I must say, it did take an awful long time. But I'm pretty happy with it. I didn't even need to use my Spray Max 2K lacquer. This is just standard 1K lacquer. And when my fingers stop aching, I probably will come back at some point and continue polishing this lacquer with rubbing compound and cutting paste and so on. But for now, I think I'm pretty happy with it, and it can stay here until the spring. So for now, thanks for watching and cheers.